Good evening and welcome once again to Edge of Reality TV. I'm Willie Hassel, along with the lovely, the mystical Lynn Nickerson.
Good evening, Willie.
And
how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good.
I'm doing good. What a beautiful day it was today, huh?
Yeah, in the 60s. How
60s
strange.
in February. Yep.
Very strange.
But hey, we have a great guest with us tonight.
Yes, we do.
He is the author of 15 paranormal books.
That's incredible.
I know it, that's a lot of books. He's been featured on a number of television shows on the Travel Channel, Destination America, and the Biography Channel. And he is also currently a producer for Travel Channel's A Haunting series. And he is our good friend, Sam Baltrusis. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Welcome, Sam.
Good
to see you.
Thank you for having me again.
Pleasure.
Oh, thank
Always
you
a
for being
pleasure.
It's always great to see you.
A veritable resource of information. So you've been having a pretty darn good year in many aspects. I wanted to go over your accomplishments to make everybody aware of what you've been doing. You just recently released a book called Ghosts of the American Revolution, and that was up for 2 nominations, which was Book of the Year, and in the category the Best Contributor of the Year. Is that right? And then your Chef d'oeuvre, which is The Curse of Lizzie Borden, the documentary, and that was nominated for the best paranormal documentary, actually, shock doc, yeah.
Yeah, so
right?
yeah, the Paranormal Awards, which I really have no idea who's part of the Paranormal Awards or how it was nominated.
But they like you is the point,
yeah,
you know?
exactly. I was like, oh, this is great. I have no idea what this is, but this is great. But yeah, the
I'll take it.
Yeah, so the documentary was nominated as well as my book, Ghosts of the American Revolution, and then
Yeah.
also Contributor of the Year. I'm not sure what contributions were nominated, but I was.
They didn't make that clear, huh? But you'll take it anyway.
I'll take it anyway.
Because really, it's
an
another
honor. Thank you so much for
It is.
nominating me.
Yeah, it's a feather in your cap. And then you've got like 15 books to date. And what I'd really like to get into in just a minute is your role as producer on A Haunting. That was fascinating. And you also had a podcast with Joni Mahan called Paranormal Rewind. And that can be found on your website?
Yes, if you go to paranormalrewind.com, I have all the archives for the past 2 years. It's
Okay.
kind of like my COVID project, so it actually got me through COVID.
Yeah,
Doing this
mental
radio
health
show.
for everybody. I know what you're saying.
Exactly.
And then you started your newest one, which is the Haunted Hotels podcast.
Right.
And I did see that, your latest one with Ryan Buell.
Right.
That was really fascinating. And then you did, of course, your documentary on Lizzie, and I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about that in the second half of the show.
Sure.
So, in quizzing you, I wanted to start at the beginning and get an idea of, well, you were clairvoyant as a child. Did you see and sense ghosts as a child?
I did. So I was like the kid from The Shining. So I felt like I felt like there was definitely stuff happening. My grandfather was the first person I saw when I was a child.
And he had passed.
He had passed, and so I thought I was normal, and then I put on what we call paranormal blinders. I was so scared about a situation that happened when I was a kid to the point where I blocked it out, and. To give you some insight, like I've kind of gone back home to Florida, where this took place, and it's something that's been kind of haunting me most of my life, and it's a man wearing a hat when I was a child.
Whoa, it goes back that far.
It was back that far, and so my sister and I were just talking during the holidays, and I'm like, do you remember this house, this old house, and we had this huge bay window that was looking out to the front yard. And I remember seeing something in the window with red glowing eyes when I was a kid, and that terrified me. And I just kind of shut down. And I had multiple experiences in that house when I was a kid. So
Did your sister ever see that?
she and I talked about it, and she said I felt like there was always something in the window looking at me as well. And so having my sister kind of bring it up, and it was like one of those things that we never talked about. But I'm like, did you experience something in the house? I did. And there were situations where she has epilepsy, so when she was a child, she had epilepsy. So she had situations where she was running around, what may have been a reaction to the medicine that she was on. But looking back on it, it may have been paranormal related. Just because there was stuff that happened, it was just beyond unbelievable. with her when I was a child.
Were you there? I mean, did you participate in the experience, or did
Right.
she relate
Well,
that
I mean,
to you?
she was having like a reaction to the medicine, which is what the doctor said. So she would have a seizure. She chased me around with a pencil and was like going to stab me with a pencil. So-
Do you feel persecuted or what?
and I'm like, the fact that we're related to Lizzie Borden makes complete sense now. And I'm like,
Now you get it.
Angie, I think that that makes complete sense that she was going to attack me with a pencil. So I was stabbed with a pencil while my mom was like, Angie, like when I said like while
Oh,
she
she
was,
managed to do it.
yeah. So my mother, she did stab me with a pencil, but it was just like sticking in my leg. And then my mom was like, you know, with my sister, and like she's having a reaction to the medicine. They took her to the doctor. But during that whole period, we were having experiences at my home, and the house was Satcham Road, so like there was a lot of Native American
Yeah.
backstory to it.
Connotations and-
Yeah, and so there was a lot of stuff going on. But I clearly remember seeing red glowing eyes in the window, and this is around the time of like Amityville Horror. Not to age myself too much, so I was like, oh, it's got to be like Jody the Pig or so, you know, like something from Amityville Horror, but. Yeah, so it's one of those things that I revisited later in life, and I think that the Hat Man has been with me most of my life.
Did you see the movie as a child? Amityville
No.
Horror?
I didn't-
That would be terrible as a child.
I will tell you this. So a lot of my experiences with scary movies, because I was terrified as a child of like The Shining, of anything that was scary, and so my friends on the school bus would. Read all like they were readers, and so they would read books, and they would say, oh, this is what happened in The Shining. They would give me like a play-by-play of what happened in The Shining, and then I started like that actually inspired me to start reading books. So I read like the book to Amityville Horror like as a young child, like when I was around like 10 or 11. I read The Shining when I was a young child too. So because I was terrified of watching it, I would actually read it. But I think that did. Kind of like lead to me ultimately being a writer myself and an author.
Well, I would think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is, given that you're clairvoyant and very sensitive, I'm wondering why it is that you got into the paranormal, because a lot of people do it with the idea in mind of, increased celebrity, or sometimes it's just a matter of having the satisfaction of demystifying the unexplained. But I know that you've got another aspect to that. So why is it that you pursued the paranormal?
Well, the paranormal pursued me. I
Okay.
didn't pursue the paranormal. I think that, I was a journalist for 20 years before this.
Yeah.
I actually used my gifts as an investigative and journalist. I did a lot of entertainment stuff too. For example, one of the things I did is I wrote about made in Massachusetts films. And I did a website called Loaded Gun. Well, the thing is, I was able, so the thing was, people would go to my blog, Loaded Gun Boston, to find out where the movie was filming and where. Guess how I figured it out? I used my abilities to figure it out. So people are like, how do you know all this information? And I would actually use my abilities to kind of like predict where the filming location was going to be. I've done it also with
cool.
true crime stories that
yeah.
I worked on as a journalist. So I did use my gifts throughout that time, but it wasn't until about 12 years ago I got sober. So sober from alcohol, I drank a lot for most of my life to basically drown out the ghost. And then when I got sober, my whole life kind of opened up, and my clairvoyance got stronger and stronger as I progressed. And so it's one of those things that, like, once I stopped drinking, I started realizing that, hey, I'm not crazy. It actually is something that I'm experiencing,
Yeah.
and I just accepted it.
It's not DTs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm not to the ET part yet, because like I'm terrified of aliens, and
I
so.
said DTs.
Yeah. DT. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
DTs,
We don't have to
ETs,
talk
is
about
separate.
aliens.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
What happened? Okay, go
No,
ahead.
no. Oh gosh, I forgot what I was going to say. So when you were a journalist, were you focusing on history? It wasn't the paranormal at that time though, right?
I would always write the paranormal themed article in October. So there was a
okay.
period where I was also a TV producer during that time. So So I was a television producer. I was in radio for a while, and then I did print as well. So I worked for like Newsweek, New York Times,
Okay.
and also like websites like MTV.com and that sort of thing. But what I during that time, though, I did focus on. There was a period that I was the editor of a newspaper in Florida. I went back to Florida for 2 years or so, and then I would always write the Halloween themed story. I came back in 2007 to Boston, and then I wrote an article for Stuff magazine, which doesn't exist anymore. And it was on haunted hotspots in Boston, and that led to my first book, Ghosts of Boston.
Oh, I'll be darned. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting chain of events, how that developed. Well, then, I was asking you about, what the satisfaction is, and you did mention, as being a producer on The Haunting, that you're able to mentor the people who've experienced these things, so the hauntings and whatnot, the paranormal. So could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was on A Haunting season 10, and I was the 100th episode, so it was kind of a big deal. And I know the whole process of working with producers to tell the story and tell the story as correctly as possible. So I talked with my producer at the time, who ended up being one of my coworkers this year. And so it was like this process of discovery and kind of like walking through what happened and reliving a really horrific situation that happened to me that was recounted on the 100th episode of A Haunting called Provoking Evil.
Oh, so it was you that it happened to.
Season 10.
Okay.
All right. So, but season 11, they're like, hey, we're looking for an associate producer.
Okay.
My good friend Laura Marini, who is the showrunner of the show, she asked me to be an associate producer. So my role was to find stories for season 11, but also to talk to the people like I was talked to as a subject. So by having been on the show, I was able to kind of coach the ones that are now on season 11, and you're seeing that unfold on the Travel Channel, Discovery Plus every Friday night.
It was your job to vet them then.
It was to vet the stories, but also
Yeah.
to let them know that it's emotional. Like when you have a situation, like with my situation, I had an attachment that nearly killed me. So when you have something that horrific and you're talking about it and reliving it, it does dredge up emotion. And so my job really is to revisit something that's painful, but also but viewing it that, hey, I know this is going to be painful for you. What happened, and kind of digging for the information. As a journalist, I use my skills as a journalist to kind of probe for information, but also do it in a way that's loving and
Yeah.
supportive and also like respectful of their experience.
So the content and the trajectory of the episode was up to you?
So the season 11 was based on not every episode. We have a team of people that focus on it.
Yeah.
I worked on several episodes within season 11. So I would first talk to people that had stories, whether they came through that I knew or people that were passed on to me. I talked to them on the phone usually, and sort of said, hey, this is actually going to work for an
Yeah.
hour-long episode of A Haunting. And it has to be twists and turns for an hour long. If it's just a segment, then it's
Yeah.
not as much as involved. So you have to have those twists and turns that you need for an hour-long show. So when I got to that part, you actually talk to them and, hey, are they actually credible? And like that's something you have to consider. Like, are they someone that do I think this really happened?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I mean, I think if you sit down with somebody and you actually have a conversation with them, you can kind of sense whether or not they're telling the truth. And sometimes the stuff is fantastic, like way over the top.
Yeah.
And it's like, did that really happen? I don't say that to them, but I'm kind of thinking that in the back of my mind, like, did that really happen? And a lot of times, like when it comes to the paranormal, yeah, this is a television show, so you have to kind of make it work for the TV show. When I say that, for example, I was on A Haunting season 10. There was a period where Joni Mahan reached out to me and said Sam, and Joni Mahan's an author, and she was also my co-host on Paranormal Rewind. she's like, Sam, did you, something's wrong. I know something's wrong. And she sensed that something was wrong with me. And on the show, they had her like banging on my door, like, Sam, let me in. And the recreation.
Dramatized it just a little bit.
Dramatized it a little bit. So when I say drama, like certain things that were dramatized that work better for a TV show
Yeah.
versus what happened in reality. Because the reality, she actually reached out to me on
phone?
social media.
On social media.
And she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't think so, Joni. Something's going on, you know. And she immediately called Michael Robichaud, who's a shaman.
That's right. I remember he helped her.
He helped
with
her,
both of her
and she's been
attachments.
through it too, so she knows what
What the
I was
signs
going
are.
through, and that's kind of the same thing that I feel like I'm paying it forward with the season 11, people that were featured on season 11 of A Haunting.
Yeah.
Because I was helped, and I'm helping them. In some cases, I actually did step in. Like the haunting continued with them, and they're like, "What should I do?" I'm like, "Well, I have a demonologist friend that can help you, you know, or I have a priest friend that can maybe help you cleanse what's going on in your house." So not only was I kind of like a therapist, but I was kind of like someone that helped them, you know, with their situation.
Yeah.
And every situation was different. We had
Yeah.
one that had dolls that.
Yeah, that's season 11, isn't it?
Yeah, season 11,
Okay.
and my good friend Mary Jo Chudley, and she's someone that I knew about the dolls, and I'm like, Mary Jo, get those dolls out of your house now. And I've told her this over and over and over again. I love her very much, but as you see in the episode of A Haunting, she's enchanted by those dolls. So how do you like word it where she's, you know, you're still friends after?
Yeah.
Because I've always said, like, get those dolls out of your house, but but you'll see in the episode why she holds on to them.
Always blame it on the dolls, right?
Yeah, blame it on the doll. Well, I wanted to get more into that, but that season 10 was about you then and your attachment. Was that right?
Right, so episode 100 and season 10. So every season has 10 episodes. And
Okay.
so Mary Jo is an episode in season 11. And she is an episode that is near and dear to my heart because she and I talked about it from the very beginning, and we created the episode together.
So that's the devil dolls, right? If that's the
The
episode.
Devil's Doll, yep.
Well,
And
didn't you say that anybody who came in contact with them became sick?
yeah, it was horrible. It was a horrible case, and you know, this is a show. Like, so I'm a producer. You can't really get, and I'm also clairvoyant. So when you're working with these cases, you're going to see and hear things because you're talking to people that are actually in the middle of a haunting. With Mary Jo, I knew immediately there was something wrong with the dolls when I first saw them, and I'm terrified of dolls too, to make it even more.
Dolls and clowns, maybe?
The dolls and clowns. And so this doll, I'm like, Mary Jo, I care about you, but that doll is like bad news. And so but she got sick to the point where she almost died.
You mentioned a blood disease or something?
So she had a really bizarre like hemoglobin drop, and she was rushed to the hospital, and almost like that the doll was like an energy vampire or like a blood sucking vampire, and so she had a near death experience after taking the dolls into her home, and other people in her life have gotten sick too. So whether it's the psychic that Scott Davis who came in and actually kind of figured out what was going on with the dolls, and he's a clairaudient, so he was hearing the messages coming from from what was coming from the dolls and what was attached to the dolls. And then also we have James Anita, who's a demonologist who I'm friends with as well, who came in and basically did a cleansing with one of the dolls. And we identified that one of the dolls was actually the one that was the negative energy attached to it.
Just one of them.
Right. The other one had a human spirit attached to it, but the one that was identified and put into basically like an Annabelle-like box, and blessed because it was that bad.
Wow. So were both the dolls cleansed? Was he successful with exorcising the one doll that was?
I will say this: she continues to be sick, and it's mysterious. We don't know what's going on. Her husband now, like I feel like it's going after specific people, and if you see the people that are involved with this case, they're getting sick too.
It's still active.
Yeah.
And she's hanging on to the doll.
Yeah.
Where did she get the dolls?
She got them, so on the show, and this is another example of where things have kind of changed. She actually got them in an online marketplace, but in the show, it says that she was looking at an ad, like a doorknob ad kind of thing, and she found but so it actually came from an online marketplace.
Like on Facebook? Gotta be careful.
Yeah.
What you buy on Facebook.
And the dolls, like the thing is, the reason why she wanted this, like one of the dolls was that it was a Madame Alexander doll, and her mother, who recently passed, was a Madame Alexander collector, so she was kind of doing this in honor of her mother, and I think that's why she's holding on to these dolls.
And what kind of doll was it?
It's a collectible doll called the Madame Alexander doll.
Is it like a Raggedy Ann type doll, or is it more like a porcelain?
It's like a porcelain face,
Okay.
like turn of the century,
Okay.
Victorian era looking doll, and they're highly collectible. And she saw one that reminded her of what her mother collected.
And there was nothing negative written in the ad about the doll, is that right?
So looking at the dolls, like I'm actually not sure if there was anything negative, but the interaction with the doll man, as we call him, was negative. Let's put it that way. The person that sold her the dolls was like, get those dolls out of my house, and she's like, I just want the doll, like that kind of thing.
So that she actually gave him money for it.
She did, but it was like, we're talking like $25. Yeah.
So 25 cents is more like it. Oh my gosh.
Get those dolls out of my house. That's kind of a hint right there, isn't it?
Well, she already had them in her house after this. So she goes back like, what is up with these dolls? And she was like, so he first was like, oh, they were owned by my grandmother. I don't have room for them. And then it went from that to the dolls were horrible. They possess people. This is whole like.
It's no joke though.
Change the story after she had the dolls in her house, and she also, she still feels really attached to them, and it's sort of I'm terrified of dolls, and I've actually held one of the good one, Gretchen.
Did you?
And I did, and I will say that it was an experience, and I was really scared to hold a haunted doll.
Did you feel some sort of energy coming off of the
I
doll?
absolutely did, and and also too, and a lot of people may. When I was holding it, we had multiple pictures while I was holding it, and there was one that was like me kind of like terrifyingly holding the doll, and then there's another picture of my face being more like morphing, and then there was the next picture was normal. So
Whoa.
yeah, not just like I channel, so I have seen that and
You
I've
have to be
experienced.
careful.
I have seen and experienced it multiple times. So when I'm connecting with the energy, my body changes, morphs.
Willie had an experience like that, looking in a mirror and changing, and people saw him change into a young girl.
Yeah, at the
So that-
Shanley Hotel in New York.
Oh, and that's another location that I'm terrified to go to.
I won't go.
Yeah, I like everyone's like, because I do a podcast called Haunted Hotels with Sam Baltrusis, and they're like,
Right.
like what locations? I've been to the Stanley. I've been to like all the iconic haunted locations. I just came back from the Plaza Hotel in Chicago, the Congress Plaza
Congress
Hotel.
Plaza, yeah.
Yeah, and so I've been to like the most haunted hotels.
Yeah.
Stanley terrifies me. I don't know
There's
why.
so many. I don't know. There's just so
I
much
used
that
to
happening.
go out there all the time. It used to be
Everywhere.
kind of like my second home when Sal still owned it. I haven't been since the new owners.
It was like 6 or 7 years ago, right?
I don't think it's quite that long. It's a few
Just
years,
about.
but we're just about at the bottom of the hour, so
Oh,
I'm
dear.
told. So
Okay.
it's just about time to take a little break, and we'll be back in a couple minutes with
All
our
right, then.
guest,
We'll
Sam
continue with the
Baltrusis.
haunted dolls.
Talk more about the haunted dolls. Yeah. Okay, we'll be right back. Yeah, welcome back to Edge of Reality TV with our guest tonight, Sam Baltrusis. Welcome back, Sam.
Welcome back,
Thank
Sam.
you for
Thanks
being
for
here once again.
Having me back.
Hey, you know we love to have you.
And we weren't going to kick him out because the show wasn't over. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know.
So we were talking about the haunted dolls, and I don't want to harp on this too much longer because I have a bunch of other questions. But why does she hang on to the dolls?
That's the question that everyone asks. Like everyone that she consulted with that's been featured on the show, like their ultimate conclusion is get rid of those dolls. And well, we identified that one has a human attachment, which I think hold on to that one, and that's the Gretchen doll. But the other doll with the really negative attachment, she has currently in a box. And I feel strongly that the box is blessed very much like how they handle Annabelle, but it's in her home. And if you talk to anyone that has haunted objects or collects haunted objects, the number one rule is to not have it inside your home because it's going to make you sick. It's going to affect you. And so yeah, I mean, everyone says get rid of the dolls, and she still holds on to it. I mean, it's one of those things that I support her as a friend, but I strongly think she should get rid of the doll.
I think you were right when you said she's enchanted. I think it's almost like a spell being cast on her.
That's what's going on. Yeah.
That's what I think so too.
Yeah.
And then what about the other entity really quickly? Male, female?
So it's kind of like a monster. And so it basically presents itself as like almost like a with fangs and also kind of like a little monster. And this is like I'm clairvoyant, so
Like an elemental, do you think?
like an elemental. And one would argue that maybe it was demonic. Another person would argue that it's maybe interdimensional. I'm in a school of interdimensional entities. And so I think this is something that's interdimensional. I do think, and this is explored in the show, that there was a ritual of some sort used with this doll.
Really?
And this has been picked up by multiple psychics. So and we do explore that. And it was almost referred to as a reversal baptism, like sort of like how you would baptize a child. You would do the opposite. Like it was something was used in ritual. And talking to people that I respect that deal with haunted objects, that's like the number one reason why an object would be enchanted or haunted, is if it was used in ritual of some sort.
Well, then how do you differentiate between the demonic one and the other thing that's a monster?
You don't. So some people would call it demonic.
Both of them demonic. Some people might call them both demonic.
Right. I mean, I think that I strongly think that a lot of cases are not demonic. That a lot of things are misinterpreted as the D word. I don't even like saying the word.
Yeah.
But I also think that that it's presenting itself like if you were Ed and Lorraine Warren, for example, you would probably classify that as a demonic infestation. I classify it as an entity that may or may not have been human.
Yep.
Something inhuman.
Okay. So before we get away from a haunting program, I wanted to talk really quickly about the cop from Rhode Island that was experiencing poltergeist activity. And it's kind of interesting when there's a cop involved in stuff like that, because you get they're usually straight shooters when it comes to the paranormal.
Yeah, so this gentleman was a former cop. So he actually lost his job, left his job. And his father so he kind of came from a family of police officers. So even having working with him and interacting with him, he still is a cop, even though he's not physically a cop. But
it's a mindset.
It's a mindset. When he walks into a room, you can see him scoping the room. And even like when I was on set with him, I'm clairvoyant, so I saw what he was dealing with, and this monster, this little thing, like a detachment thing, was running around the room, and he and I were like looking at each other because I was behind the camera, and he and I kept looking at each other. He's like, "Do you see it?" I'm like, "I see it." And so
you mean he saw it too?
No, he hears it. So I suspect that Joe, the gentleman that was a former cop, is clairaudient. And so he's like, and it would say things like, you're stupid, you're this, you're that, really negative things towards Joe. And also he would attack his wife Donica as well. And so Danica was a little bit more skeptic, but she started seeing what appeared to be images, like someone writing in the mirror, like so, like some like basically like messages in the mirror, which is really interesting. So Carl Johnson and Elise were the ones that dealt with that case and brought that case to a haunting. And I was able to see Joe after the diagnosis, and it was actually it presented itself as demonic. But when Carl came in, he actually said this is PK, which is psychokinesis. And so it's an outward manifestation of the turmoil that's within. So almost kind of like it's a poltergeist experience. I saw it. And I believe it was an attachment.
Well, I'm with you on that, because it sounds to me like it was some sort of entity and not just a frequency of PK.
Right.
I think it was like an imp or something, like a little devil to cause havoc.
Well, whatever was running around the room looked kind of like you were talking like a dog face, like it was like really like it was like a dog.
It felt like a dog face.
A dog face, yeah. And I saw it. It had like really like messed up hair, like pieces of hair coming out, and it kept running around. And it had this voice that was like really squeaky, like Joey, stupid, you know, like that. It was like this weird. It would just kind of go around the room, and he's like, "Do you see what I'm dealing with?" I'm like, "I do. Yeah, like this is crazy."
Well, where do you think he picked this up? How did he?
Out in the field. I think that he was a police officer.
Yeah.
He actually had a near fatal, where there was a gunshot and the bullet kind of grazed him on the side.
Okay.
And like his hearing was messed up. I think it was around that, and he and I talked about his past, and I was getting that there maybe it's like a human involved somehow with what's going on with him. It could be the guilt associated with the death that happened while he was on duty. Let's put it that way.
Well, do you think a curse might be involved?
Possibly. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
or there was a misunderstanding that he may have been involved with something that he wasn't involved with.
Oh.
So the spirit, the human spirit I was kind of coming in contact with while I was talking to him was someone that passed away while he was on duty, and he felt somehow that the police officer was responsible, that Joey was responsible. And I don't want to get too personal. It's his story. It's not my story.
Sure.
But I do think that there was something that someone that may have passed that.
So there was resentment there on the part of the party that was injured or passed away.
That passed away,
And
yeah.
maybe it was the result of negative energy directed at this man.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm like, did this happen? And he's like, yep. And the thing is, like, he was there, but he was not when the young man was shot.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in the vicinity, but he would go to this situation over and over again.
Yeah.
As a cop. And it was sort of like a troubled child that he would
Yeah.
kind of come in, like, you need to stay out of trouble, and he ultimately got shot.
Oh boy, that's unfortunate. How
Yeah.
long was he bothered by this activity?
It's been going on for several years.
Oh,
and
geez.
to the point where and also too, if you see the show,
I'd love to.
yeah, so he would do things like he would actually use, like, he started watching shows to learn how to ghost hunt, because he wanted to know what was happening.
What the heck it is.
And
You
he
have to
wanted to
mystify
basically
it.
validate the voices that he was hearing. And so he actually started doing things like using a EVP recorder, like a regular digital
Did he
recorder.
in the house?
In the house. Then he also used a spirit board. And you and I, we all know that that's not good.
And by that he means Ouija board, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, spirit board. And
Bad choice.
yeah, so they were using it, and also while they were doing the spirit board, they picked up the name Azazel. And so when you first hear what happened in their story, you automatically think that it was something demonic. But I do believe that it's not demonic, but it's something dark. But the maybe tied to
Mischievous
human.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is he clear of it now? Do you know?
So the diagnosis from Carl was that he, so it was poltergeist. So he has kind of like that he basically controls what's happening in the room. So if he's in an upset state, or if he's like angry at his wife, or he's afraid,
Feeds
this thing
off
will
of that.
respond. I will say, having interacted with him after the diagnosis, I think things are definitely better for him, and like that's the conclusion of the show. But I do think that there may be a lingering attachment that's happening with him, and I was just kind of giving him some pointers on how to deal, because I had an attachment to it.
Yeah,
I'm able to recognize it, and that's what I mean. Like as a producer on a haunting, my job was to tell their story and not to insert myself into their story. So I had to kind of help them, like, on the DL, you know, I wanted to help them, but I also didn't want to be part of the story.
Did you narrate part of this?
No, I mean, it's
Sam?
a TV show that's narrated by Tony Call, who's
Okay.
a world famous narrator.
Okay.
So, I mean, I wish I had his voice. He's got a
Yeah.
great voice.
Oh, well, so do you. It's just I wasn't sure what your part was in it, if you were doing that too, narrating for the.
No, I'm just an associate producer for the show.
Okay.
So yeah, so basically I put the story together and I tell their story.
Yeah.
So I'm not part of their story,
Yeah.
although in real life I really am part of their story
Yeah,
because I'm
'cause
working
you're
with them.
intervening, sure. Oh, wow, that's interesting. Well, you've got another book here, the 13 Most Haunted Hotels and Inns of New England, and then you've got a newer edition. So since we've got sort of a local audience, I wanted to talk about maybe the Colonial Inn for just a minute, because you did post something on Facebook, a short clip, and you were going over the various ghosts that some people have seen there. So this is a really nice hotel, yeah, in Concord, Massachusetts. So can you talk about that just a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So I believe in immersion journalism. So I actually work at Concord's Colonial Inn, and I do the overnight shift a couple nights a week. And the thing is, for me, like I'm there to do the research and to get to know the spirit. So I do feel called to locations, and sometimes I don't. I kind of go. Very like I'm kind of tentatively going there. This one I feel like that's a very positive energy at Concord's Colonial Inn. I think there's been some misinformation that's been put out, and like that's kind of what I think the spirits want me to work on.
Okay.
And kind of digging into their backstory. Like I'm actually working on pitching a book on Concord's Colonial Inn to dig into what really happened in 1775. A major player during the American Revolution. We know for a fact that there was gunpowder that was stored at part of the building. There was one building, the section, so it was actually 3 structures that were kind of smushed together to create an inn. And then there was an addition that was added later on. But we do know the one portion was a part of the American Revolution, but was Thomas Minot, who was the famous doctor that owned the building, but was he actually part of the American Revolution? And did he actually bring in soldiers into the inn? That's something that I'm looking into.
Oh, that's amazing. What about the sighting of a Revolutionary soldier? Is that
Bona
bona fide?
What if I tell you that there may not have actually been soldiers brought in to the inn for
Period.
Yeah, like they may not have been brought in. We know that there was gunpowder there, so it definitely when patriots were there.
Patriots.
I have seen a red coat in Concord's Colonial Inn. I've also seen a child. I've seen a woman. So I do think that those spirits, that it's a spirited place. But the room 24, which is the most active room, wasn't there in 1776.
Oh, is that the blue woman?
There's a woman there, and she has like salt pepper hair. I just call her the woman.
Oh, okay.
And so the blue, what's the blue woman?
I think that's something else than it was referred to the blue woman. I don't know if she's
There's a lady in the
wearing
blue
in
dress.
a window.
There's a lady in the blue dress actually in Salem.
Okay.
But
Maybe
yeah,
that's-
so this woman, I think that her clothing, she has been reported wearing bluish clothing at some point.
Okay.
But this woman had salt and pepper hair. She's in her 40s. And
What period?
I would say late 1800s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what
so it's
I would
older.
say. I've interacted with her, and I would say just based on my interaction, she may have been one of the previous owners of. There was a period right before in like the late 1800s before it became an inn that it was owned by a certain family, and I think this may be one of the family members.
Okay. So she is an active haunt and not a residual one then, right? Because
I think a lot of
around?
the energy in Concord's Colonial Inn is residual in nature because of what happened in the 1700s during the American Revolution. I think that so the soldier could have been residual. I think that what we're looking at in some cases may be what we call thought forms.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I mean, if you
which-
investigate a location over and over again, you're going to create a ghost.
You know, I find that hard to believe, but like Andy Kitt of KRI, he believes that can be done, and I'm still out on that one.
Shane was another one. Shane was another one that was.
Oh yeah, Shane. That you can create thought forms. I know that there was an experiment done where a group of people created a ghost, and then a psychic came in and identified the ghost that they created.
Yeah, the Phillips experiment.
The
It was-
Phillips
and
experiment.
It was also recreated on Kindred Spirits. They did at the Oliver House. I found that show was really frustrating because I feel like that I know that the ghost that of the Oliver House in Middleborough is haunted, and they almost kind of like overlooked the actual hauntings, and they wanted to focus on this experiment. Here are my things. Like the spirits that are at in Salem, like the lady in the blue dress, there's no historical backstory to her. Her
Yeah.
story's told over and over and over again. So I think that she may have been created, like by telling her story. The soldier at the Concord's Colonial Inn, what if it wasn't actually a place used for operations during the Battle of Concord and Lexington in 1775? What if there's no historical backstory to that? And like people have seen it, and I believe them when they tell me that they saw a soldier, and it's been reported by multiple, like including Joni Mahan.
Okay.
Yeah, so multiple people have seen the soldier. Why would they be there?
Well, then how could you differentiate between a thought form and an actual ghost?
That's a really good question. And
History is about the only thing, maybe,
And
if you
so-
can find historical evidence.
yeah, so a thought form, and a lot of people are like, well, if you can, like, people create thought forms, they don't know they're doing it. It's not like that they're intentionally creating thought forms.
You do believe that?
I do.
Yeah?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that energy is very powerful, and I think that the lady in the blue dress, like I've seen her image, like I've seen photos of this lady in the blue dress. I know for a fact that she probably did not exist, but who was she? Or she's a spirit that's basically taking that role.
Yeah, yeah.
And that could be that too.
I could go with that.
And so when I say that I believe that it could happen, the thought form idea, I think that it's a case by case.
Yep.
And that's like the last thing I go for, but I will say that there seems to be more of it than we want to admit to.
Okay. Well, we'll leave the Colonial Inn right now, and we'll go to the Lizzie Borden house. You found out that you're related to the Borden family.
I am, yeah. So my mother, who was a genealogist, when she retired, she started doing Ancestry.com, and I'm like, "Yay, Mom, that's good." She loves to. I'm a historian. I got it. My stepdad was a history teacher. My mom was definitely like. She loves history. I asked my mom, like, what does she want to be if she, like when she grew up, and she's
History
like,
teacher.
My mom wanted to be like a crime scene investigator.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay, Mom. I'm like, I support you in your crime scene investigation. So instead, she started doing Ancestry.com, and it turns out that the first doozy was that we were related to the Putnam family, and the Putnam family
With the witches.
no, the Putnam family actually were the bad guys during the Salem witch trials. So they were responsible for, Ann Putnam Jr. was my distant cousin, responsible for 62 people who were accused of witchcraft in Salem. And when I found that out, I was devastated. I was like so heartbroken that.
Well, what position was he in? Was he a judge or what? He just accused people?
No, Ann Putnam Jr., so she's a girl. She was a afflicted girl.
Yeah, okay.
She was a young girl that was part of the girls that accused innocent men and women.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So she was an afflicted girl that accused, but her dad was the puppet master, and so Thomas Putnam. And so I do think that, so I found that I was heartbroken. So she's like, I have something else I have to tell you, but I'm like, you're not taking this very well, Sam, so I'm gonna hold off. And then so she waits after, and I'm like, okay, Mom, I'm ready. What's going on? She's like, well, in addition to the Putnam family, we're also related to, and I'm like, okay, Mom, tell me. Lizzie Borden, and I started crying. I'm like, imagine. Well, it made my whole life make sense. You know what I mean? And so it was just like I mean, I've been on the show before. What did I talk about? The dreams that I had over and over again.
I was going to ask you about that.
Over and over again about Lizzie Borden. Like, this is before I knew I was related to her. And I'm like, Mom, prove it to me. I'm like, prove it to me that we're related. I mean, it makes complete sense because I told you about my sister earlier with the pencil, and just my mother has this side that just kind of like go like that, and she could just kind of snap on a dime. I'm like, okay, Lizzie Borden makes sense in our family. So she did. So we're related to her not once but twice. We're related to the Earl family. What?
Eliza?
So no,
Or
Eliza
not?
actually was not blood relation.
Okay.
Yeah,
Was
so
it her husband, though?
Her husband, Lodwick,
Okay.
yes. So he's related to us.
Okay.
So yeah, and when I was on Curse of Lizzie Borden, and they actually said that I was a direct descendant. I'm actually not a direct descendant. She was a cousin. She didn't have any
Okay.
children, so I can't be a direct descendant of Lizzie Borden.
Okay.
And that was just their misinformation. But we're definitely cousins, not once but twice, and maybe even 3 times.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And to clarify, Eliza, it was Eliza Borden?
Right. Yeah. So
Okay.
she actually married into the Borden family, and so she would have been an auntie to Lizzie Borden. And
Was she a great aunt or not?
a great aunt.
Great aunt, okay.
Yep.
And she had 3 children or 2?
She had 3 children, and so Eliza Borden lived next door, and so we kind of known about this case.
Yeah.
Sort of like not a lot of information about it, except for that it was literally right next door to where the murders took place in Fall River.
Right. I mean, the properties were contiguous, right?
They were. So the land was
yeah.
contiguous, and so like, you can even like when you look at if you go to the house now, you can actually look out the window and see where like the land where Eliza lived with her husband.
Yeah.
So she so it turns out that she actually killed 2 of her children by putting them down a well. And the children would have been my distant cousins as well. So I'm
Yeah.
connected to the children,
Yeah.
maybe more than I am connected to Eliza.
And one of them lived, correct?
One of them lived, but the thing is, I do think there's a 3rd child haunting the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, and I think maybe it's the sister, or it may have been maybe Lizzie Borden's sister that she had a sister that died.
I didn't know that.
When her mother, so it could be like one of like her actual sister. So
Okay.
there are 3 children at the house, or there were 3 children at the house.
So you have not only investigated several times, but then you made the movie, the documentary, the shock doc on the curse of Lizzie Borden here. So I'd kind of like to talk about that too. So we got over Eliza.
Well, the part that so at the very end, so she kills her 2 children, she walks upstairs and she takes a straight razor and cuts her neck.
Yeah,
And so,
very
why,
disturbing behavior.
why would you do that? I mean, why would you do that? And so, the gist of the show, and I think I've told on this show before, I always have thought that there was something darker that was responsible for the murders. And I think that there may have been a possession of some sort. I think that I've always thought that there may be something more sinister at play.
Because it is such deep, deep evil to take a hatchet to somebody and kill them. And that was 2 people, not just 1.
Right.
There's got to be something really deep-seated that's evil.
And
So-
yeah, so and she's small framed. If you look at her frame, like I do think she did it, and everyone like that's the number 1 question. Do you think cousin Lizzie killed?
I still do, too.
Her father and her stepmother, and I'm like, I do, but was it dissociative disorder? Was it was she
Possession.
Was it like a lot of people want to talk about the sexual abuse that may have happened at the house, and I do think that there was sexual abuse.
Yeah, I think there could have been. That
But-
might have been the reason that she...
That she snapped.
Yeah.
But I also think that I've had an attachment. I think that it's kind of like taking the blame off of the murderer. So it's like, do I think that she did it? I'm like, I think she did it, but was she responsible for doing it? But I do think that she was like, if it's similar to what happened to me, she was going in and out of consciousness.
I think she was predisposed to that kind of behavior only because this woman is such a great representation of the true Lizzie.
Oh yeah,
Unbelievable.
So, yeah, the actors playing the actual people did an amazing job, and the woman that played Lizzie Borden looks identical to her.
She did, identical.
And the
I
woman
know.
that played Eliza, the woman that I channeled in the show, she did an amazing job too. And I'm like, you captured that emotion that I was feeling.
Wow.
And when I watched the show over and over, like I've watched it when it first came out. I was watching it. I'm like, I can't believe that happened because I didn't know what happened when I was channeling. So I was
Yeah.
out of consciousness for a while, and I mean, seeing me cry I'm like crying really emotively, and I said this to Dave. I'm like, that wasn't my pain; it was her pain.
She's running through you.
But it was running through me, and it was taking me over, and it took me a year to get over that. I mean, like, why would someone put themselves in the situation and feel that much pain to be on a show? And it's like one of those things that, like, looking back on Curse of Lizzie Borden, I'm glad I did it. I feel like I was called to do it. I was supposed to do it. But I don't know.
Puts you through hell.
Having a camera follow you while you're like ugly crying, it's not fun,
Yeah.
And so I just pretended like the cameras weren't there, and I had a mission. My mission was to help these spirits. And the spirits that I was supposed to help was not Lizzie Borden, not Abby, the victims, or Abigail, or sorry, Abby, not Abigail. But it was the children. I was supposed to help the children. And like that was my role. So when we were there, the spirits, and this was during COVID, so the spirits in the house were really wanting to cross over. And
You think this was Eliza's children? Is that right?
I
Or you
really do. I
okay.
really do.
Okay.
I think it's Eliza's children's because I knew that there were children there before, but I didn't
Yeah.
make the correlation until I actually channeled
Yeah.
Eliza. And when I channeled her, it was like, okay, those are your children. and the thing is that one of the children followed me home. So after all this, there was one child, and this is the one that was the infant child.
Mm-hmm.
She was holding up the child to the light. So Chris and I worked together where we did a beam of light to heaven, and she was holding the child up to heaven and like take my child.
Yeah,
And, it
yeah.
was beautiful.
Yeah,
And
incredible.
you know what? I hate to have to say this, but we just got the 2-minute warning.
I know, I
So-
know. I did want to say that Lizzie, I think, is predisposed to being mean. So this is why I think she might have been easily taken over, because she didn't like Abby. She and Emma never accepted her into the family. So I think there was kind of that predisposition, and it was a way to work out her anger, but I think it got carried too far, if that is the case. I mean, I think it's a possibility.
I mean, if you really look, and that's the thing, like if you really look at her life, she left after the murder. She led a miserable life. I mean,
Yeah, she did.
She was like kids with their rocks at her in the collar. You know, like Lizzie Borden took an axe while she was alive.
Yeah.
And she stayed in Fall River.
Yeah.
And like
Stubborn.
Yeah. So she was like, I'm going to stay in Fall River and I'm going to accept this. And also too, like she loved animals. So she like donated. She created like what could have been like what was like the first animal society. So she was I really think she was a good person. I think she was a misunderstood person. Maybe she definitely had some mom issues. She lost her mother. And so I think
Early
that
on.
there was definitely like, you're not my mother to Abby.
Yeah.
And she called Bridget, she was like, almost like she was like beneath her.
Yeah.
And there was potential like was Bridget and Lizzie in cahoots. And I mean, like possibly, but she called her Maggie, and Maggie was a derogatory word, like name. It was like she called, like it was not a good, positive thing.
Okay, so we have to know your vital information, how people get a hold of you and your books.
So if you want more information, go to sambaltrusis.com. It's BALTRUSIS.com. My books are available on Amazon, and hopefully local bookstores carry them as well. And if you want any of the shows, including The Curse of Lizzie Borden, you go to Discovery Plus and the Travel Channel. Although The Curse of Lizzie Borden is only on Discovery Plus.
Okay.
So it's a streaming service that has pretty much all my shows.
Oh, good.
Yeah, all right.
All
Well,
right.
Sam, thank you once
Thank you
again
so
for
much.
joining us.
Thank you.
And,
Always interesting.
Speaking of haunted dolls and stuff,
Yeah.
next month on the show we're going to have Cody Ray Desbians and Satori Hawes, and they're hopefully going to be bringing some of the haunted objects from their Paranormal Couples Haunted Museum.
Yeah. Do you want to come and watch?
Absolutely, and I can't wait to be part of the U.S. Asylum. I'm going to be giving
Oh,
a
that's right,
lecture
in
on the Sunday.
That's
so
right.
May
Can't wait for that.
22nd, the Sunday.
22nd.
Glad. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yep. Okay,
Well, thank you very much, Sam. It was
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
thank you, Sam. And
Wraps up another episode.
that is it for this month, and we'll talk to you all again next month.
Okay. Bye, everyone.